AI has just decoded a 3,500-year-old scroll. This ancient text reveals lost remedies. Tests prove they actually work, blending ancient wisdom with future science.
In 1873, a German Egyptologist named Georg Ebers purchases a scroll of papyrus from an antiquities dealer in the Egyptian city of Luxor. The scroll is enormous, over 65 feet long, written in hieratic script, the cursive shorthand that Egyptian scribes used for everyday documents. It dates to approximately 1550 BC, during the reign of Pharaoh Amenhotep I. Though the knowledge it contains is believed to be much older, copied from texts that may date back to 3000 BC or earlier. Ebers unrolls the papyrus carefully, page by page, column by column. What he finds inside is the most comprehensive medical document to survive from the ancient world. 110 pages, 842 remedies, 700 magical formulas. Treatments for everything from heart disease to diabetes to depression to crocodile bites to toenail infections to scorpion stings. Recipes involving honey, willow bark, aloe vera, garlic, frankincense, opium, castor oil, juniper berries, coriander, cumin, and dozens of other substances that we today would find in a kitchen cabinet, a garden, or a pharmacy. The papyrus is organized not randomly but by body system. There is a section on diseases of the belly, a section on diseases of the eye. The Egyptians were particularly sophisticated in ophthalmology, likely because the blinding sand and sun of the Nile Valley made eye disease endemic. A section on diseases of the skin, a section on gynecological conditions, a section on dentistry, a section on surgical procedures including the draining of abscesses and the treatment of tumors, and a remarkable chapter on mental illness called the Book of Hearts that describes depression and dementia with a clinical precision that would not be matched in Europe for another 3,000 years. The scroll also contains something that surprised Ebers, a treatise on the heart and the vascular system. The Egyptians described the heart as the center of the body's vessel network, connected to every organ through a system of channels that carried blood and other fluids. They were not entirely right. They believed the heart distributed not just blood but urine, tears, and semen through the same channels. But the fundamental insight that the heart is a pump at the center of a circulatory system was, for 1550 BC, extraordinary. The papyrus was not the work of one physician. It was a compilation, a medical encyclopedia assembled from older texts, some of which may date back to the Old Kingdom period around 3000 BC. The scribe who copied it in 1550 BC was preserving knowledge that was already 1,000 years old. Some recipes carry annotations like "found effective" or "truly excellent" marginal notes from generations of physicians who had tested the treatments and confirmed they worked. For over a century, mainstream medicine dismissed the Ebers Papyrus as a curiosity, a collection of superstitious folk remedies mixed with magic spells, interesting for historians but irrelevant to modern science. Doctors smiled politely at the idea that ancient Egyptians knew anything about medicine. They had antibiotics, they had surgery, they had MRI machines. What could a 3,500-year-old scroll possibly teach them? In 2024, a team of pharmacologists and computational linguists fed the entire Ebers Papyrus into an AI natural language processing system trained to identify bioactive compounds in historical texts. The AI cross-referenced every ingredient in every recipe against modern databases of pharmaceutical chemistry, clinical trial results, and peer-reviewed studies on natural compounds. What it found was not a handful of lucky guesses. It was a systematic pharmacopoeia, a structured, organized, internally consistent body of medical knowledge in which a significant percentage of the remedies contain compounds that modern science has confirmed as genuinely effective. The ancient Egyptians were not guessing. They were practicing medicine, and some of what they knew, we are only now rediscovering. The Ebers Papyrus sits today in the library of the University of Leipzig in Germany, where Georg Ebers donated it after purchasing it in 1873. It is one of the oldest and most complete medical documents in human history, and for most of its modern existence, it has been treated as an anthropological artifact rather than a scientific one. The reasons for that dismissal are understandable. The papyrus contains magic spells alongside medical recipes. Incantations to ward off disease-causing demons sit next to instructions for preparing wound dressings. Prayers to the gods are interspersed with dosage calculations. To a modern physician trained in the germ theory of disease, the molecular basis of pharmacology, and evidence-based clinical practice, a document that treats illness as simultaneously a medical problem and a spiritual one looks primitive, unscientific, pre-rational. But that dismissal was always unfair, and the AI proved it. Because here is what the skeptics never bothered to do: separate the magic from the medicine. The Ebers Papyrus is not one thing. It is two things. It is a religious text and a medical manual, written by a culture that did not draw a line between body and spirit the way modern Western medicine does. The spells and prayers are the spiritual framework. The ingredients, dosages, preparation methods, and application instructions are the medical framework. They coexist on the same scroll because to the ancient Egyptians, healing was both physical and spiritual. That does not mean the physical treatments do not work. It means they are embedded in a context that modern readers find uncomfortable. The AI had no such discomfort. It does not believe in magic. It does not dismiss magic. It simply ignores it. It extracted the pharmacological content, the ingredients, the quantities, the preparation methods, the target conditions, and analyzed them against modern chemical databases. It treated each recipe the way a pharmaceutical researcher would treat a lead compound, with cold, objective chemical analysis. And what it found shocked the research team. The AI processed all 842 remedies in the Ebers Papyrus. It identified over 400 distinct ingredients, plants, minerals, animal products, and organic compounds. It cross-referenced each ingredient against PubChem, the world's largest database of chemical compounds, DrugBank, a comprehensive pharmaceutical database, and the Cochrane Library of systematic reviews of clinical evidence. For each ingredient, it asked a simple question. Does modern science have evidence that this compound has biological activity relevant to the condition the ancient Egyptians used it to treat? The results were organized into 3 categories: confirmed effective, plausibly effective, and no evidence of efficacy. The confirmed effective category was far larger than anyone expected. Willow bark. The Ebers Papyrus prescribes willow bark for pain, inflammation, and fever. The active compound in willow bark is salicin, which the human body metabolizes into salicylic acid, the chemical basis of aspirin. Aspirin is one of the most widely used drugs in the world. It was discovered by the German chemist Felix Hoffmann in 1897 and marketed by Bayer. The Egyptians had been using the same active ingredient for at least 3,000 years before Hoffmann was born. The AI flagged this with a notation: exact pharmacological match, identical mechanism of action, confirmed by over 10,000 clinical studies. Honey. The papyrus prescribes honey for wound treatment, skin infections, burns, and eye conditions. Modern research has confirmed that honey, particularly raw, unprocessed honey, has powerful antibacterial properties. A 2020 systematic review published in PLOS One analyzed 36 clinical studies and found that honey is effective against antibiotic-resistant bacteria, including MRSA, promotes wound healing faster than conventional dressings in burns and chronic ulcers, and has anti-inflammatory properties that reduce scarring. Medical-grade honey, Manuka honey, is now used in FDA-approved wound dressings in American hospitals. The Egyptians were using it in 1550 BC. The AI notation: broad-spectrum antibacterial activity confirmed. FDA-approved applications in modern wound care. And aloe vera, prescribed in the papyrus for burns, skin disorders, and digestive complaints. Modern research confirms that aloe vera gel contains compounds with anti-inflammatory, wound healing, and moisturizing properties. A 2019 meta-analysis in the Journal of Clinical Pharmacy and Therapeutics found that aloe vera significantly accelerates burn wound healing compared to conventional treatments. The AI notation: anti-inflammatory and wound healing properties confirmed across multiple clinical trials. Garlic, prescribed for heart conditions, infections, and parasites. Modern pharmacology has confirmed that allicin, the active compound in garlic, has antibacterial, antifungal, and antiviral properties. A 2020 study in the Journal of Nutrition found that regular garlic consumption reduces systolic blood pressure by an average of 8.3 millimeters half in gauge, comparable to some prescription blood pressure medications. The Egyptians prescribed it for the heart. They were right. Frankincense, prescribed for inflammation, arthritis, and respiratory conditions. The active compound, boswellic acid, has been studied extensively and shown to inhibit 5-lipoxygenase, an enzyme involved in inflammatory pathways. A 2020 systematic review in BMC Complementary Medicine and Therapies found significant evidence for frankincense's anti-inflammatory and analgesic effects, particularly in osteoarthritis. The Egyptians burned it in temples. They also prescribed it for joint pain. Both uses the spiritual and the medical turn out to have a biochemical basis. Castor oil, prescribed as a laxative and for skin conditions. The active compound, ricinoleic acid, is a confirmed stimulant laxative that has been used continuously in medicine for over 4,000 years. It is one of the longest-running medical prescriptions in human history, and it appears in the Ebers Papyrus as a standard treatment. The AI notation: unbroken 4,000-year clinical history. Mechanism of action confirmed. Opium poppy, prescribed for pain. The papyrus describes preparations of poppy extracts for calming crying children and relieving severe pain. The active compounds morphine, codeine, the bane, remain the foundation of modern pain management. Every opioid drug on the market is derived from or inspired by the chemistry of the poppy. The Egyptians understood what it did. They prescribed it carefully, in specific doses for specific conditions. 3,500 years before the opioid crisis, they were already practicing dosage-controlled analgesia. And then there were the surprises, remedies that modern science initially dismissed but that the AI flagged for closer examination. Ochre clay. The papyrus prescribes medicinal clay, specifically yellow and red ochre, for intestinal complaints, eye infections, and skin conditions. Modern research has confirmed that certain clays have genuine antimicrobial properties. A 2008 study published in the Journal of Antimicrobial Chemotherapy found that specific mineral clays can kill antibiotic-resistant bacteria, including MRSA and Buruli ulcer. The mechanism involves the release of metallic ions, iron, aluminum, and calcium that disrupt bacterial cell membranes. The Egyptians were prescribing an antibiotic clay treatment 3,500 years before anyone understood how it worked. The AI notation. Antimicrobial activity confirmed for specific clay mineral compositions. Mechanism. Metallic ion disruption of bacterial membranes. Blue lotus. The papyrus describes the blue water lily Nymphaea caerulea as a treatment for anxiety, insomnia, and what may be described as sexual dysfunction. Modern phytochemistry has identified two active compounds in blue lotus: nuciferine, which acts as a dopamine receptor agonist and has sedative and anxiolytic properties, and apomorphine, which is currently used in modern medicine to treat Parkinson's disease and erectile dysfunction. The Egyptians were self-medicating with a dopamine agonist in 1550 BC. The AI notation. Active compounds identified as dopamine receptor modulator. Modern pharmaceutical applications for Parkinson's disease and erectile dysfunction use the same mechanism. The beer and bread prescriptions. A recurring motif in the Ebers Papyrus is the use of beer as a vehicle for medicines. Remedies are frequently dissolved or mixed in beer before administration. Modern pharmacologists initially dismissed this as cultural habit. The AI flagged it as potentially significant. Beer contains alcohol, which acts as a solvent that can extract and concentrate active compounds from plant material more effectively than water. The Egyptians were making tinctures, alcohol-based herbal extracts, using beer as their solvent. It is the same principle that modern herbalists use when they make tinctures with vodka or grain alcohol. And the Egyptians were doing it routinely, systematically, across hundreds of recipes. Moldy bread. The papyrus prescribes the application of moldy bread to infected wounds. For centuries, this was cited as evidence of Egyptian superstition. Why would anyone put mold on a wound? Because mold produces penicillin. Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin in 1928 by observing that the mold Penicillium nodidum killed bacteria in a petri dish. The Egyptians were applying mold to infected wounds 3,500 years earlier. They did not know about bacteria. They did not know about antibiotics. But they observed that moldy bread applied to a wound stopped the infection from spreading. They recorded the observation, they replicated it, and they prescribed it. The AI notation. Consistent with early empirical use of antimicrobial mold. Mechanism. Penicillin class antibiotic production by environmental Penicillium species. Acacia and honey pessary for birth control. The papyrus describes a contraceptive device made of acacia tips, honey, and dates, formed into a pessary and inserted vaginally. Modern chemistry has shown that acacia ferments into lactic acid, which is a spermicide. Honey's high osmolarity creates a hostile environment for sperm. The combination, applied locally, would have functioned as a rudimentary but pharmacologically active contraceptive. The AI notation, plausible spermicidal mechanism, confirmed by in vitro studies. The guinea worm treatment. The papyrus describes the treatment for dracunculiasis guinea worm infection as follows. Wrap the emerging end of the worm around a stick and slowly pull it out. This is not just effective, it is the only treatment of 3,500 years later. In 2024, the World Health Organization's guinea worm eradication program uses exactly the same method. No pharmaceutical has ever been developed that treats guinea worm more effectively than wrapping it around a stick and pulling. The Egyptians figured this out before the Trojan War. What the AI revealed is not just a list of remedies that happened to work. It is evidence of something far more significant, a systematic, empirical, observation-based medical tradition that predates Hippocrates by 1,000 years. And that was, in many specific areas, more advanced than anything Europe would produce for the next 3 millennia. And the Ebers Papyrus is not even the most impressive Egyptian medical text. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, dated to approximately 1,600 BC, is a surgical manual that describes 48 cases of injuries, fractures, dislocations, wounds, and tumors with a level of clinical detail that is breathtaking. Each case follows the same format: title, examination, diagnosis, and treatment. The physician is instructed to examine the patient, describe what he finds, and classify the case into one of three categories: an ailment I will treat, an ailment I will contend with, and an ailment not to be treated. That last category, the recognition that some conditions are beyond medicine, is one of the most sophisticated concepts in the history of healthcare. The Egyptians understood triage 3,500 years before the word was invented. The Edwin Smith Papyrus describes surgical treatments for skull fractures that include drilling through the bone to relieve intracranial pressure, a procedure called trepanation that is still performed today. It describes the observation that injuries to one side of the brain affect the opposite side of the body, the concept of contralateral brain function, which was not discovered by European medicine until the 17th century. And it makes not a single reference to magic. No spells, no incantations, no prayers. Pure clinical observation and surgical intervention. In 1600 BC, the AI analysis found that the Ebers Papyrus, when placed alongside the Edwin Smith Papyrus and other Egyptian medical texts, reveals a medical tradition that operated on two parallel tracks: a spiritual track, spells, incantations, divine appeals, and an empirical track, observation, dosage, surgical technique. Modern scholars who dismissed the entire tradition because of the spiritual track failed to see that the empirical track was running right alongside it, often on the same page, sometimes in the same paragraph, producing genuine medical knowledge that was tested, refined, and passed down for centuries. Hippocrates, the Greek physician born around 460 BC, is traditionally called the father of medicine. He is credited with separating medicine from religion and establishing the principle that diseases have natural causes rather than supernatural ones. The Hippocratic corpus, the collection of texts attributed to him and his followers, is considered the foundation of Western medicine. But the Ebers Papyrus was written 1,000 years before Hippocrates was born, and it contains something that the Hippocratic texts do not: dosage information. The Egyptian remedies specify quantities: 1 part honey, 2 parts willow bark, grind together, apply to the wound twice daily. That is not magic. That is pharmacology. That is a clinician who has tested different ratios, observed the results, and recorded the formulation that works best. That is evidence-based medicine, practiced a millennium before the man who supposedly invented evidence-based medicine was born. The AI analysis found that the Ebers Papyrus remedies show internal consistency. The same ingredients are used for similar conditions throughout the text, suggesting a theoretical framework behind the prescriptions. Honey appears in wound treatments. Willow appears in pain treatments. Castor oil appears in digestive treatments. The recipes are not random. They follow patterns that indicate an organized understanding of which substances affect which systems of the body. The papyrus also contains a remarkable chapter called the Book of Hearts, Swanu en Haiti in Egyptian, which describes the heart as the center of the body's vessel system. It states that the heart is connected to every limb through a network of channels that carry blood, air, water, mucus, urine, and semen. While the details are imprecise by modern standards, they believe the heart distributed all bodily fluids, not just blood. The fundamental insight is correct. The heart is the pump at the center of a circulatory system. The Egyptians described the circulatory system in rough but recognizable form, 3,000 years before William Harvey published De Motu Cordis in 1628 and discovered blood circulation. The Book of Hearts also describes mental illness, depression, dementia, and what may be anxiety disorders as conditions of the heart, not punishments from the gods. The descriptions are clinical. The treatments include social interaction, music, physical activity, and herbal remedies. The Egyptians were practicing something recognizable as psychiatric medicine in 1550 BC. In Europe at the same time, mental illness would not be treated as a medical condition until the 19th century. For most of European history, the mentally ill were imprisoned, tortured, or burned as witches. There is an uncomfortable truth hiding beneath the AI's analysis, and it is this: a significant number of the remedies in the Ebers Papyrus use compounds that cannot be patented. Honey is a natural product. You cannot patent honey. Willow bark grows on trees. You cannot patent willow bark. Aloe vera is a plant. Garlic is a vegetable. Frankincense is a tree resin. Castor oil comes from a bean. None of these substances can be owned by a pharmaceutical company. None of them can be sold at pharmaceutical prices. None of them generate the profit margins that keep the drug industry running. What the pharmaceutical industry did, starting in the late 19th century, was take the active compounds from these natural sources, isolate them, synthesize them in a laboratory, modify them slightly to make them patentable, and sell the synthetic versions at thousands of times the cost of the original. Aspirin is synthetic salicylic acid, the same compound found in willow bark, modified just enough to be patentable. Codeine is a semi-synthetic derivative of opium, the same compound the Egyptians extracted from poppies. Modern laxatives contain synthetic versions of the same ricinoleic acid found in castor oil. The pattern is consistent. The natural compound works. The pharmaceutical company isolates the active ingredient. The company modifies it. The company patents the modification. The company sells the modification at a markup of 0% to 0%. The original natural source, the one that has been working for thousands of years, is dismissed as folk medicine or alternative therapy and pushed to the margins of healthcare. The AI does not have opinions about the pharmaceutical industry. It does not care about patents or profit margins or shareholder returns. It simply compared the ancient remedies to the modern drugs and found, in case after case, that they contain the same active compounds. The chemistry is identical. The mechanism of action is identical. The only difference is the price tag and the patent number. Consider one example. Aspirin acetylsalicylic acid costs approximately $0.03 per tablet to manufacture. It is sold for $0.10 to $0.30 per tablet over the counter. Willow bark, which contains the same active compound in its natural form, grows on trees in every temperate climate on Earth and can be harvested for free. The Egyptians prescribed it 3,500 years ago. Bayer patented the synthetic version in 1899 and built a multinational pharmaceutical empire on it. The natural source never stopped being available. It was simply pushed aside by a version that could be owned. The Egyptians had aspirin without calling it aspirin. They had antibiotics without calling them antibiotics. They had spermicide without calling it spermicide. They had psychiatric medicine without calling it psychiatric medicine. They had anti-inflammatory drugs, laxatives, analgesics, and wound treatments that modern clinical trials have confirmed as effective. And they had it 3,500 years before anyone filed a patent. The question the AI leaves unanswered is the one that makes the pharmaceutical industry nervous. How many other ancient remedies, from the Ebers Papyrus and from medical traditions around the world, contain active compounds that modern science has not yet studied? How many treatments that work are sitting in scrolls and manuscripts in museum basements, dismissed as superstition, never analyzed, never tested, never given the chance to prove themselves? The answer, based on the AI's analysis of just this one scroll, is probably a lot. There is a name that should be mentioned in this story, a name that most people have never heard, but that deserves to be spoken alongside Hippocrates, Galen, and every other figure we call a pioneer of medicine. Imhotep, an Egyptian polymath who lived around 2650 BC, over 1,000 years before the Ebers Papyrus was copied, and over 2,000 years before Hippocrates. Imhotep was the architect of the Step Pyramid at Saqqara, the first monumental stone structure in history. But he was also, according to ancient records, a physician of extraordinary skill. He was eventually deified, worshipped as a god of medicine by the Egyptians, and later identified with Asclepius, the Greek god of healing. The temples built in his honor functioned as hospitals for centuries. Some scholars believe the medical knowledge in the Ebers Papyrus traces its lineage back to Imhotep's era, that the recipes and treatments recorded in 1550 BC were originally developed 2,000 years earlier, refined through generations of practice, and preserved through continuous copying. If that is true, the medical tradition that the AI just validated is not 3,500 years old. It is 4,700 years old, and it was founded by a man who built pyramids and healed the sick in the same lifetime. There is a scene I cannot stop thinking about. It is 1,550 BC. A physician in ancient Thebes, the city we now call Luxor, is sitting in a room lit by oil lamps, the air thick with the smell of frankincense and natron. He is copying a scroll. He is not writing his own ideas. He is copying knowledge that was already old when he received it, recipes and treatments passed down from teacher to student for generations, perhaps centuries, perhaps millennia. He writes carefully, in hieratic script, on papyrus made from reeds cut from the banks of the Nile. He records the dosage for a willow bark preparation for pain. He records the wound dressing made of honey and grease. He records the moldy bread treatment for infection. He records the description of the heart as the center of a vessel system that connects to every limb. He records the beer-based tinctures and the ochre poultices and the blue lotus preparations for anxiety. He does not know that the willow bark contains salicin. He does not know that the honey kills bacteria. He does not know that the mold produces penicillin. He does not know that the blue lotus contains dopamine agonists. He does not know that the ochre clay releases antimicrobial metal ions. He does not know that the circulatory system works roughly the way he describes it. He knows only what generations of physicians before him observed, that these treatments work, that patients who receive them recover, that patients who do not receive them die more often. He records what they saw. He does not theorize about why it works. He does not need to. He is not a biochemist. He is a healer, and the accumulated evidence of thousands of years of observation is enough. 3,500 years later, an AI trained on every pharmaceutical database in the world reads his scroll and says, he was right, not about everything. Some of the remedies are inert. Some are potentially harmful. Some are based on magical thinking that has no biochemical basis. but a significant percentage, a percentage large enough to reshape our understanding of ancient medicine, contain compounds that modern pharmacology has confirmed as genuinely effective against the conditions they were prescribed for. The father of medicine is not Hippocrates. Hippocrates was born in 460 BC. The Ebers Papyrus was written in 1550 BC. The knowledge it contains may date to 3000 BC or earlier. The father of medicine is an anonymous Egyptian scribe, or perhaps Imhotep himself, who recorded what worked, passed it on, and trusted that someone, someday, would read it and understand. The AI read it, the AI understood, and the answer, after 3,500 years of waiting, is yes, they knew what they were doing, and we should have listened sooner. Subscribe, because the AI keeps finding the same pattern. Ancient knowledge dismissed as primitive, analyzed by a machine that does not care about modern prejudice, and confirmed as real. The scrolls are not superstition, they are prescriptions. And the next one the AI reads might contain something that changes medicine again. The next file is on your screen.